Welcome to today's episode of Desert Island Science. To watch more about the iGEM team's journey, you can find our channel by searching for Exeter iGEM 2016 on YouTube. Our castaway today is Professor of Synthetic Biology here at the University of Exeter, Dr. John Love. As Director of the Exeter Microbiome Biofuels Group, his research employs a multidisciplinary approach investigating and engineering hydrocarbon production in bacteria, algae and yeast for the industrial production of fourth-generation biofuels that can directly substitute for fossil petroleum-based products. So welcome, Dr. John Love. You've been an iGEM supervisor here at Exeter University since we started. How did you first become involved?
Well, that was one of the things that we wanted to do when we started synthetic biology, was to take it out to students as quickly as possible. And iGEM offered a really good route for that. And not only that, but it also got us involved with the people that we wanted to be involved with in that nascent field.
So what's your number one tip for an iGEM team?
Well, basically the number one tip that we always give all our iGEM teams is find a project that you devise yourself that responds to the synthetic biology paradigm of design, iteration, experimentation, and round in that circle. And then just go for it and work as hard as you can and enjoy yourself as much as you can.
You said you wanted to get involved with synthetic biology as a discipline. What does Exeter University do relating to the field?
Well, actually, synthetic biology is relatively new, so we don't offer any courses to undergraduates or even postgraduates in synthetic biology like some universities do, like Imperial or UCL. But what we do offer is a whole range of modules in biology, mathematics, and physics, where people will then have a foundation to carry on in synthetic biology. And iGEM is really important for us because it brings those people who are interested in molecular biology, physics or modelling, computer science, maths all together, and then they can work out their own program really.
So we're here today to find out about your views surrounding synthetic biology, but also to hear about the items you've picked to take with you on the desert island. On the island, you already have a copy of the iGEM registry with access to all the synthetic biology parts and a solar-powered bento lab, but you're able to select one other book, one other piece of science equipment, one luxury item, and 2 songs. So tell us about the first song.
So the first song basically that I chose was For a Friend by the Communards. So slightly before your time probably, but it's one of my all-time favourite songs. And I really like it just because it's quite poignant. I think that everybody's been through the emotions that are described in the song, whether it be for a man or for a woman. And I think that it's a really, really nice song.
You mentioned in your profile that the multidisciplinary approach to solving problems, which you encountered whilst working closely with NASA scientists, has become a driver for your research. Where does it feature in your work and how?
Well, now it's completely embedded in the work, which is great because a lot of our funding comes from commercial companies, which again rely on multidisciplinary approaches. Obviously they've got business models to follow. So in addition to having scientists, you now have to work with people from marketing, from business planners, and so it's actually even added a dimension, which is something that I find really fun to work with. I think that sometimes the most interesting research is the research that other people are doing, mainly because you're coming at it from a place of ignorance, I think. And of course, doing your own research sometimes, as you know, can become quite tedious. You've got your idea, That's really creative. You've planned the experiments. Again, that's really creative. And then it's just having to work through it. And as Edison said, scientific discovery is 90% perspiration and only 10% inspiration. When you work with other people in other fields, all you get is the inspiration. And I think that is why we've really adopted this approach and why it works so well for us.
So what part of your job do you most enjoy?
Do you know, I just enjoy everything about it. When the research gets me down, the students pick me up. And when the students aggravate me, because sometimes they do, the research is what we fall back on. The job that I do at the university is diverse. It's working with people who are really great, working either in the university with people that I appreciate and also out with the university, working with other researchers in industry, at other universities, in charities. All that is just a really stimulating job. That's not to say that it sometimes doesn't have its downsides, but it's mostly upsides, I think. And I'll take the mostly upsides.
So what's been the highlight of your career?
Oh gosh, to be honest, there have been so many highlights. I think the best thing that happened was when we got our first major grant, because that enabled us to actually pursue ideas that we'd had. It's something that you learn as well, is that you can't do science without money. And part of my role in the team is basically raising that money so that I can keep everybody gainfully employed and the science moving forward. But getting that first grant was really a highlight. Being able to be trusted with a project, in a sense, from people who don't really know you was a great honour, and we delivered on that, and so it was really great to be able to do that, yeah.
Cool. And does synthetic biology feature in your research?
Oh yeah. What we've got really now is that we're working on several projects. We're working obviously on our synthetic biofuels project, which is very big and I think is a very urgent problem. And luckily we're not working in isolation. There are many, many people around the world working on the same issue, and I think that it's a good thing because it means that problems will be identified and solved more quickly that way. We're also working with now on a project that actually came out of iGEM, and this is to look into bovine TB, so new ways of detecting it using synthetic biology. And again, that will potentially have a lot of impact for farmers and for vets, especially here in the southwest of England. So I think that adopting the synthetic biology paradigm of taking things and making them as predictable as possible in terms of biological systems, and thinking about their application and also thinking about the safety implications of what we are doing, I think is really, really useful.
So tell us about the piece of science equipment you've selected.
Oh, it's a microscope. I can't do work without a microscope. I just love looking at stuff. I've always liked looking at stuff through a microscope ever since I was a little boy. And I remember when I was about 6, I think I got given my first microscope, which was rubbish. You know, it had a mirror, and it was probably the equivalent of the microscopes actually that were using in the 18th century to begin to look at cells. But I've always enjoyed that, and I think that just looking at what you cannot see is really good fun.
So a recent article on synthetic biology by the BBC was on CRISPR. Whilst talking about the benefits and the use in cancer therapy, it also talked about the risk of designer life in human embryos, saying the research left it open to a lab somewhere to create the first gene-edited babies. It then went on to feature a professor saying she'd had a nightmare in which Hitler was trying to persuade her to use this technology. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, that's a hard one because, to be honest, any technology that we have is also potentially going to be misused. I mean, there are mad people everywhere. Hitler was particularly unpleasant as a person, and he had particularly unpleasant ideas that were accepted at the time. And, you know, I don't really see how we can stop the psychopaths. What we can do, though, is as synthetic biologists and as anybody really who's at the forefront of technical developments, is to remain as ethical as possible. The advantage of synthetic biology is that because you're thinking of the application, you can also try to build in some of the safeguards, like, you could use, for instance, synthetic amino acids so that the bacteria cannot work without that being given to them. Or you could use design kill switches like our iGEM team are doing right now. But in a sense, what we like in that too is that it's a bit like building a car. You can start with the basic chassis, but then you add in all of the safety features as you're building it. And I think that's what we need to do. Now, obviously, like with the development of cars or aeroplanes, perhaps these safety features will not be apparent immediately. But that isn't to say that we can't then engineer them in the future. So I think that really what we must rely on is a strong foundation of at least some sort of professional ethic in synthetic biology. Now, I'm not saying that that necessarily should encompass any religious or worldview. I just think that what we need now is to accept and agree that we are engineering life, and we must be careful of that and be aware of that and treat it with respect, what we actually do. Apart from that, I don't really see how we can stop things that are potentially beneficial from happening because of a fear that at some stage somebody might decide to use it for a purpose that actually could only be described as evil or nefarious.
But do you think that the media presenting synthetic biology like this is going to make it more difficult for scientists to be able to release synthetically engineered organisms into the world? And how do you think scientists can work together with the media to change this?
Okay. Well, I think that obviously scientists have got a big responsibility towards the media to inform. I think that genuinely all of the media people that I have interacted with are genuinely interested in the science. They do have questions regarding implications, which are genuine questions, and they should be answered. I don't necessarily think that scientists have all the answers. I think that there needs to be a consensus. But I also think that scientists are quite well placed to point out the facts, and also that sometimes the fears are just that, they're just fears. And it's our job to reassure people and to be honest with people so that they know that they can make an informed choice. Now, in terms of synthetically engineered organisms either escaping or being deliberately released into the environment, in Britain that's not allowed. There are some trials being done on GM crops, for instance, and things like that. Now, I wouldn't classify as GM crops as being synthetically engineered yet, but there are plans to synthetically engineer plants, potentially for food, to increase food supply throughout the world. Where other people might hesitate to introduce those plants into an industrial style agriculture, I don't feel that these organisms would be harmful. So I would support it with the appropriate safeguards and legislation. I think that our role as scientists is to ensure that that legislation is evidence-based, not fear-based. I also don't think that as scientists that we should disregard or trivialize the concerns that people have. And I also think it's very beholden to young scientists like yourselves or like the people in the iGEM team or all the students that we interact with at iGEM or in our universities, that if they choose to go into a media career, they don't leave their science behind and they don't leave their critical faculties behind for a lovely story or a brilliant headline that is here today potentially and gone tomorrow. So I think that it's beholden to everyone to take a mature and rational approach to the problem.
So tell us about the book you've chosen.
So the book I've chosen is a bit weird. It's Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. I love that book, mainly because I can read it again and again and I still laugh. What I like about it is that anarchic mixture of basic humanity and all of the sort of thoughts that both Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman bring to bear on the book, which basically just eventually, for me, the take-home message of that is, for me anyway, is that you're neither an angel nor a devil. You're basically just a human being with choices. And I think that that's the brilliant thing, because in the book, the son of Satan just behaves like a little boy, acting in a very human way. And I think that that actually gives me a lot of hope for the future, to be honest.
So let's have some more music. Tell us about your second song choice.
Okay, so the second song choice is a bit of an anthem of mine by Echo and the Bunnymen. It's called The Game. And I like it because the opening line is something along the lines of, a sense of duty was my one challenge, if you like, and my duty was basically to annoy you, right? So I think that's really funny because a lot of the time that's what happens between people. And then there's the line, the world is a ball in a game, and all this sort of stuff. And too often we actually, I think, see that as real. You know, it seems to me sometimes that, yes, there's too much game playing. There's not enough appreciation of the consequences. And I think that we've seen that in a lot of recent political developments, and a lot of the conflicts that have been caused and things like that, is that, yeah, people are treating things too much like a game. Things are being trivialized. And I don't think that that's appropriate all the time. And so that sounds a bit weird, but that's why I've chosen that song.
A sense of duty was my one intention, and an ugly beauty was my own invention. Pride, a proud refusal. I refuse to need your approval. Too many seekers, too few beacons. Through the fog we will keep on beaming. Through the crying hours of your glitzy years, all the living out of your tinsel.
You've also been a judge at the Giant Jamboree in Boston for many years. What's your favourite project you've seen so far? And if you could make anything using synthetic biology, what would it be?
Okay, well, my favourite project that I've seen so far, it's difficult to say because you see so many as a judge, right? You maybe judge 10 projects every year, and you have to get into quite a lot of depth, and it becomes quite frustrating because it means that you can't go and see every single project that you want to see. But I particularly like the winning project of last year from William and Mary University in America, where they tried to define biological noise and how to measure that. I thought that was really forward-looking. I could see that from a synthetic biology discipline, that project would be really, really useful. And the insights that they gained were extremely interesting. I do like some of the applied projects, obviously, because that's what synthetic biology tries to achieve. But thinking about it, yeah, William and Mary for me is my number one so far. Apart, obviously, from the Exeter team ones, which have been awesome, as you would expect me to say.
So what would you create if you can make anything using synthetic biology?
Well, right now we're trying to do it. We're trying to create a bug that takes waste. So it could either be agricultural waste or sewerage waste, and make from that a fuel. And that's what we'd like to do. It's extreme recycling. It's taking something that has absolutely no value and creating something that has maybe some value to people. Fuel is absolutely essential for our way of life now. Being able to interact with people from across the globe, people coming to work together, going out, espousing ideas, it brings its perils, but it also brings its opportunities. And I think that being able to be involved in that is something really important. And that's what I'd like to do for the future. I would like to be able to retire and go think, okay, we helped make this happen. It means that the energy crisis, and it's not so much a crisis because there is a lot of available energy in all sorts of different forms, but the ability to keep people on the move would be a really good thing, I think, to have done.
And how long do you see it being before this becomes a...
Oh, crumbs.
Right,
well, yeah, I'm thinking in the fuel industry, you're looking at 20 to 25 years before an idea becomes actually something that you can market or sell. And so many ideas fall by the wayside. But we're working really hard on it, and so far we've been lucky. There have been a lot of problems, but we're trying to systematically, as they arise, solve them, and push the project forward as fast as we can. So hopefully within the next 20 years, but I might be retired by then.
And how important do you think it is for people to be able to release genetically modified organisms into the wild? And would you be opposed to the release of synthetic organisms into the environment?
don't think it's necessarily important for them to do that. I think that some applications can be performed quite well in closed bioreactors or in industrial facilities where you don't get contamination. A bit like a chemical plant these days. I mean, you don't have just vats of chemicals just sloshing around and being open to the environment. So I don't necessarily think that you need to release things into the environment. I think that there may be times when you might want to, for bioremediation purposes, for example. But I do think that you would have to be very, very clear about what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think that the safeguards would have to be there. And I think also you would require a very solid ecological assessment of what you're planning to do. Because if you look at places like Australia or New Zealand or Hawaii, places with unique flora and fauna, the introduction of something like a domestic cat can cause absolutely havoc in these environments. Now, if these organisms were synthetically engineered, that could be worse. So I do think that we need to be quite careful. I'm not saying it shouldn't necessarily all be done, but I think that the benefit would have to be very clear, and I think that the risk would have to be as small as we can make it.
So let's hear about your final item you've picked then, your luxury item.
Yeah, toilet paper, because basically we went on a field trip to the Himalaya last September. We were doing some coring in a pristine environment, and we were very, very lucky to work with some Chinese colleagues. We were the first Western people to ever be allowed in that area of China, and it was absolutely fascinating. It was a very long trip, though. It took us 3.5 days of walking, climbing up the hills in absolutely nowhere. We were very lucky to have some guides with us who knew the terrain and who were able to help us out, because we're just a bunch of academics parachuted into this mountainside. But it was absolutely fascinating. But after 3 days, toilet paper becomes something that you sort of long for. Coffee as well, but less so. So yeah, toilet paper definitely. If I'm all alone in a desert island, it's kind of what I'd like.
So how do you think you're going to find living on our desert island?
I think it'll be fun, to be honest. Providing it's large enough to have a freshwater supply, some nice sea to fish in, that would be great. Yeah, I'd love that. It's almost like a holiday.
Fantastic. So I'm going to cast you away now on our desert island. Dr. John Love, thank you so much for talking to us today on Desert Island Science.
Thank you.